Yeah, first of all, sorry for the bad audio quality. I'm currently traveling. I don't have my audio recording equipment with me. Angel is asking here in the forums how to adjust the automation blocks tool to export, to batch export still frames with custom naming options. And specifically, he wants to export stills using the name of the sequence. So you don't have to manually type in the output file name. Let's see. So this is the render frames at equal distances tool, and it has this user interface where we enter here the naming pattern. So my still number $1 at timecode $2.jpg. And if you want to have a different pattern and you don't want to input it here, this is the main block wrapping the entire code of this tool. Yeah, and here are the different user interface elements of it. Here is render every X frames. This is the first input. Here's second input, the output folder. You can see it here. Here's the format, JPEG, that's this drop down. And finally, you've got this naming pattern. And if you want to get rid of it, you can just take this element out. And then you can see the naming pattern becomes here a simple string, and you can replace this string by another string. So let's create a text out of multiple components here, for example. You said you want to have the sequence name. So we go to PR sequence and get its name. The name is an attribute. So we just say here, the naming pattern should start with the sequence name. And after that, you need to add something, right? You need at least to add $1 or $2 because it should probably either include the number of the still or it should contain the time code. Let's say after the sequence name, you want to put the time code. So we put here a text after the name $2. This will, after the name of the sequence, insert immediately the time code, and then underscore .jpg, for example, if you want to export JPEGs. And now we don't need this anymore, so we put it in the garbage. And once we do this, you can see that here the input also disappeared. So now we hard-coded the naming pattern to be the name of the sequence, followed by $2. And this tool itself will replace $2 by the time code of the frame that we export, and then .jpg for the format. Of course, if you've chosen here another format, could do something else here too. But I think Premiere is clever enough, even if you chose here PNG, that it will update the JPEG by PNG. Okay, this was the first question. The second was, is there a way to manually stop the script from running as I'm still in testing phase? No, there is actually no way to cancel scripts in After Effects, and you also cannot really cancel an automation blocks script, therefore. You could insert an alert like after each marker, after each frame that is exported, it could pop up and ask, do you still want to continue? But this is really making stuff more complex and it's not really helpful. I would just suggest playing or doing this with very large render every X frames values. If you put here like not 10 but 1000 or something, then it will just render very few frames anyway, so that's probably the best way to test it. Next question, is there a batch export still feature where I could load up a few videos and let it run as well as incorporating the first request using the name of the sequence? So you want to export several frames from several sequences. So what you could do is, this is the tool which exports the still frames of a certain sequence. And you pass the sequence here as attribute. Currently it uses the active sequence, right? And the details of what this is doing are hidden here. So here you can right-click expand and see exactly what needs to be done to export all these frames. Now what we want to do is execute this code several times, because you do not just want to export the frames of the active sequence, but of several sequences, maybe of all selected sequences, for example. So what you can do is go to PR project items, because we want to select some sequences here, and these sequences are project item, and we want to loop over them. We want to do something with all selected sequences, right? So what do? We take this green block, and it says for each item as my item in bin and subbins of nothing. This is the root folder. If I would put here a folder, I don't know, footage, then it would look for all items inside just this folder. But if I do nothing here, it means look at all items in my project in the root folder or in sub-bins of it. This means look at everything, yeah, all project items, but only selected ones. And now what do we want to process? Only sequences, yeah. What we get by this is give me all selected sequences and nothing else. And what do we want to do with them? Well, we want to render the frames of them. So we drag this thing in here. Let me just make some more space because now this is getting a bit bigger. Move this here out of the way. So this means if you now have selected in your project panel 5 different sequences, it will run this code 5 times. But the problem is it will always run it with the active sequence, yeah, because here the parameter for sequence that you want to use is active sequence. Yeah, so it means 5 times it would render frames, but always of the active sequence. This is not what we want. We need to tell this block now, please use each time the item that we are currently processing. Yeah, if you've got 5 sequences selected, it will execute this 5 times, and each time my item will point to the sequence that we are currently processing. So in variables, you find now my item. Here it is. And we just say instead of the active sequence, we use my item. We want to render the frames of my item, and we duplicate this and put it also here, because also the naming pattern, yeah, you should use the name not of the active sequence, but of the sequence that we are currently processing. And with this change, you now have a script where you export the frames of all selected sequences, and also you have a naming pattern not here anymore, but hard-coded. Let me save this as render frames that equal distances customized. And let me check if this is working. Let me just, I've just got one sequence here. So let me duplicate this and call this one here second sequence, and this one here first one. And now I select both of them, and let me pick an output folder. So on my desktop in the folder test, those should be placed. And now I run the script. And now we've got all our entries here in our render queue, and let's render those. And now you can see that in my test folder, I have of the sequence first one, all these frames labeled by their timecode and ending with JPEG. These are all the ones of first one. And here starts one of the second sequence. And you can see it's still rendering, it's still adding frames here. Okay, so this is how it's working to batch export frames of multiple sequences, do a custom naming, and you have this _0 here at the end. This is unfortunately not possible to avoid because Premiere Pro renders those images as image sequences, and it's always the zeroed elements of these sequences. You could maybe add a batch process afterwards to rename all those files. But anyway, you had one extra question, I think. And this was, how would you also do a custom export still by setting range using timecode? So you want to specify a minimum and maximum timecode, so to speak, that you want to export. Let me see how we could do this. For this, you need to go inside the details of this export, because this has no options yet for minimum and maximum time. Yeah, so we would want to add this. We go here in the details to add arguments for this. So we say min time and max time. Now we've got here min time and max time arguments, and you want to use a user interface, I guess, for those, right? So we go here to user interface and use an input. You wanted to enter a time code, so we want to enter this as a text because time codes are text. So we say min or start time code, and default value, let's keep it like this. Max time, let's call this end time code, and maybe let's put here default values which make sense. This is our min time code. Let's say by default we just want to export the first let's say by default we just want to export the first 10 seconds, so these are entered here now. Now this so far is just creating this user interface and then passing these two values, min time and max time, here in my implementation. So we've got variables here for max time and for min time. Here, and now we need to change our implementation here, yeah. And if you look at the implementation here, we initialize something like the duration of the sequence and the duration between two stills. This is computed based on the every x frames thing here, and we have an image counter which counts how many images did we create so far. And now we count here with the time of the still. So this is like the time where we want to export the next still. We start with time 0 and go with it until sequence duration. Yeah, so until the end. So we count from the beginning to the end and increase it by the duration between two stills, which we calculate here. Now what you want to go is actually from min time to max time instead. Yeah, we don't go from 0 to sequence duration, but from min time to max time. We can put this here to the garbage. And now the important thing is just to note that min time and max time have to be values in seconds, and 0 is the beginning of the sequence. Yeah. So this means we need to make sure that we paste in here times and seconds and not time code. And since you wanted to have time code, you need to convert this first. So we go to PR time and say convert time code to time using frame rate of the active sequence. So we drag this in here. And now, instead of just using the value you entered here, it converts this to a value in seconds, so 2 times, and it's using the frame rate of the active sequence. If you want to be if you assume that the sequences in your project have different frame rates and you want to enter here for each of them the time code in this different, so I think it really wouldn't make sense, right? If you have several sequences with different time codes, you can only enter one value here. You cannot enter one for each of the selected items separately. So I think it's fine to assume that all sequences have the same frame rate as the active sequence. Otherwise, this would create nonsense because you can just enter one kind of time code here. Anyway, and we need the same block again. Convert time code to time for the maximum time, and we drag this in here. By the way, if you feel these entries become a bit too lengthy, you can always right click on them and click on collapse, and then we hide those details here. Okay, so now what did we change? We added here a min time and max time parameter to our implementation. We made sure that these get values from these two inputs and that these timecode strings here are converted to time values, to time in seconds. And then here, instead of counting from 0 time to end of the sequence, we count from min time to max time. Okay, let's check if this is working. I just delete all these images we created. And now you run the tool again. And this time we should have created significantly less entries, since we only had so now this time we should have created only from 00 to 1000. Let's verify this. We start at 00, go to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you can see now nothing is coming afterwards anymore. So it stops at 10. So it's not giving us a value after 10 seconds. Yeah, of course it's not stopping exactly at 10:00 because it's always increasing by 10 frames. Yeah, we've got here render 1 frame every 10 frames, but it's not going beyond the 10 seconds mark here, and instead now rendering the other sequence. And also there, you can see it stopped after 9. Okay, I hope this answered all your questions and gives you an idea how to customize the output of this tool here.